A page of Austrian law lists laboratory tests. A sample of every quality white wine had to pass them to earn a state number. The last 3 entries on that list: glycerin, sugar, and a chemical used in antifreeze formulations. Why would a country write that into its own wine law? The answer is the story of a word. In 1985, a small number of Austrian winemakers were caught dosing their wine with a cheap chemical called diethylene glycol. A German news magazine, Der Spiegel, gave the affair its name, Antifreeze selection. The name stuck. Within weeks, Austrian sales had collapsed. People still tell a story about that year. They say Austria poisoned its wine with antifreeze. That story is wrong in a precise way. Diethylene glycol really is used in antifreeze formulations. But it's not the antifreeze in your car radiator. That one is ethylene glycol, a different chemical, sweet tasting, and lethal if you drink enough. 2 different chemicals, one word sitting over both. So what was the glycol actually for? Faking expense. Expensive sweet wine comes from grapes picked late, after they've gone sweet and concentrated. Wine like that tastes sweeter, and it sits thicker and heavier in your mouth. The glycol faked both. A dose of it let thin, cheap wine pass for the top legal grade, the expensive shelf. The buyer was Germany. Nearly all of Austria's top-grade sweet wine went there. It didn't travel in bottles. It crossed the border in tank trucks. On the 21st of December 1984, a man walked into a federal farm chemistry institute in Vienna. He handed over a bottle of colorless, odorless liquid. He said to have told the staff this was what Austria's wine forgers were using. Then he was gone. To this day, nobody knows who he was. By late January 1985, chemists had confirmed the glycol in wine. Then the paperwork finished the job. Afterwards, it was reported some companies had claimed the cost of the glycol on their tax returns. They deducted the fraud as a business expense. By one account, more than 30 producers went to jail. The same account counts 800 wineries searched and 28 million liters of doctored wine seized. Austria was never the whole story. Germany ran 2,500 sugar fraud prosecutions of its own. The biggest of them had already ended in a German courtroom that same year. A local dealer went to prison for 4 years. He'd stirred 530 tons of sugar into about 10 million liters of cheap white wine. That wasn't new either. In 1981, 2,000 growers in the Palatinate had been convicted of doing the same thing. Most people only noticed because of Austria. Then the glycol turned up in German wines too. Sellers and bottlers in Western Germany had spent years stretching their wine with Austrian imports, glycol included, and selling it as top grade. 5,000 German growers marched. 4,000 Austrians marched too. The ending split. Austrian courts sent people to prison. One German glycol case alleged 137 million marks of profit. It ended with no conviction. An acquittal. Then the case was dropped in exchange for a 1 million mark payment. Was anyone actually poisoned? The experts of 1985 couldn't agree. On the 13th of May, Germany's Federal Health Ministry put its answer in writing. The glycol was present in such small quantities that a health hazard is not to be feared. The magazine that coined antifreeze selection printed that telex as proof of official sloppiness. In the same article, toxicologists warned that as little as 1/10 of a gram per liter could have serious consequences. The question never settled. A German court judgment later recorded that the exact thresholds of harm were not known, and that the glycol could not from the outset be classified as harmless. Then, Britain. On the 11th of July 1985, it publicly warned against 3 types of Austrian white wine. In the same breath, it said all Austrian wines must be regarded as suspect. The next day, its own environmental health officers were told no action was needed. No acute health risk existed. No immediate danger. The wine was pulled because the additive wasn't permitted in wine, not because anyone had shown it to be dangerous. And the human toll, no death was ever recorded. No injury was ever attributed to the chemical. The word kept moving. In 1986, it reached Britain's parliament in a debate that wasn't about Austria at all. The debate was Italy's deadlier methanol scandal. But when Austria came up, the government reached for one word. That was antifreeze. Less harmful, they noted, but that was the label. The word antifreeze was a magazine's invention from 1985. Within a year, a parliament used it as the chemical's name. A consultant on Austria's recovery later gave his diagnosis. The antifreeze connotation, he wrote, caught the imagination of the media. The word did it, not the dose. The bill came due in liters. In 1984, Austria exported about 48 million liters of wine. In 1986, about 4 million, roughly 9/10 of the export trade, gone. Austria answered with the law on the 24th of October 1985. Its own memorandum never says scandal, only that the events of recent times showed a new law was needed. The rules got physical. Wine could reach a customer only in glass bottles, unless it was drunk on the premises. The wine that once moved by tank truck would move in glass. Containers up to 50 liters carried a numbered seal from the state. Anyone convicted would see the judgment published at their own expense. The growers hated it. Even before it passed, 4,000 of them marched in Vienna against a law they felt was harassing them. The opposition called it unworkable, and the rush to pass it a slapdash job. The people the law saved marched against it. A minister named Hayden defended it in parliament with a prediction. More effort would mean higher quality, higher prices. At first, he looked wrong. The law couldn't stop the collapse. Exports hit their 4 million liter floor anyway. Then, slowly, he came right. Volume took until 2001. That was 15 years up from the floor. Austrian wine had fetched about 77 cents a liter in 1984. In 2019, it brought nearly 4 times that. About a third more wine, far more money, and sweet wine was out. Which brings it back to that page of tests. For a generation, every Austrian quality white proved itself in a laboratory. The last test on its standard list was for diethylene glycol. The damage was never the dose. No injury was ever attributed to the chemical. The word took 9/10 of a trade. The 1985 law is gone now. Since 2009, a new wine law governs, and the chemical's name appears nowhere in it. The machinery survived. The state test number, the seal, the federal cellar inspectors. A country can't jail a word. It can only outlast it, test after test, bottle after bottle, until it's believed again. Subscribe for more stories told straight from the archives.